Chapter 153. Fighting against Foundation Establishment. One saber slashed down. It was like the earth sinking and the sky collapsing. In everyone's eyes, this saber came down from the sky. It seemed not to be a saber, but the sky was collapsing. This was the might of the sky falling. This saber was Lin Fei's strongest saber so far. Without a doubt, whether it's saber intent, saber energy, or the saber technique, they were all Lin Fei's current strongest. Facing the saber, the three elders of the royal family and even the top chi condensation cultivators probably only have deep despair. However, Lin Fei's opponent was the supreme elder of the royal family, a foundation establishment realm cultivator who had lived for 500 years. Good saber technique. This saber technique has even some implications of saber momentum. If your saber intent really turns into saber momentum, maybe it can really make me feel a headache. However, it's just a saber momentum simulated by the saber technique, it's not worth mentioning. Now, let me show you what is foundation establishment. The supreme elder of the royal family slowly extended his hand. This hand was somewhat withered and looked a little thin. It was an old hand, but it was this hand that turned gently. Boom. The whole heaven and earth, or to say, the whole imperial garden, all of them shook instantly. In the void, countless heaven and earth spiritual chi all seemed to collectively agitate. These heaven and earth spiritual chi turned into a huge palm. It seemed like the palm of the Supreme Elder had been magnified countless times and then clenched hard. Boom. Heaven and earth shook. Lin Fei's saber energy, which seemed capable of slashing everything, even the earth turning upside down, 250 meters tall, actually disintegrated instantly under this huge palm made up of spiritual chi. Endless saber energy was annihilated by this huge palm of spiritual chi and disappeared without a trace. Everything became quiet. The entire imperial garden seemed to have returned to its calm. It didn't even look like there had been a fight. Even the flowers, plants, and trees in the imperial garden hadn't suffered any damage at all. The breeze was blowing. There seemed to be a hint of chill. A hint of astonishment appeared in Lin Fei's eyes. Once upon a time, Lin Fei thought he could cut through the foundation establishment with his heavenly saber art and saber chi. However, when he truly faced a foundation establishment cultivator, he found that his saber energy, his saber intent, even his saber technique, seemed insignificant. The supreme elder of the royal family looked at the slightly shocked Lin Fei. He shook his head slightly and said, "It's not that your saber technique is too weak. Rather, it's a difference in the realm. Do you know how much strength you used just now?" Lin Fei asked solemnly, "Please enlighten me, true person." "Not even 1% of my power." Boom. Lin Fei's mind roared instantly. This can't be possible. Even if Lin Fei knew that the gap between him and a foundation establishment cultivator was large, it couldn't possibly be so large that he couldn't even withstand 1% of a foundation establishment cultivator's strength. This was simply impossible. As I said, different realms lead to different understandings. Just now, the palm that I struck used a very limited amount of my own spiritual power. I simply used my realm to manipulate the spiritual chi of heaven and earth in the entire imperial garden. We chi cultivators pursue coexistence with heaven and earth and make use of the mighty power of nature. Just now, I merely used a trace of spiritual power to leverage the spiritual chi of heaven and earth in the entire imperial garden to cast a sealing spell. Lin Fei understood. The supreme elder only used a small amount of his own power. But he was able to leverage the spiritual chi of the entire imperial garden. Therefore, the power of the spell he cast was so great. However, was the palm that the supreme elder just struck really a spell? That palm, it looked a bit like a martial arts technique. Supreme Elder, was that palm really a spell? Lin Fei couldn't help but ask. Of course it was a spell. However, different paths lead to the same goal. Once a martial artist builds his foundation and becomes a martial sate, he will possess martial Dao divine power, which is even more formidable than that of spells. Lin Fei understood. He bowed to the Supreme Elder and said, "Thank you, true person, for helping me understand the gap between me and the foundation establishment. Without becoming a martial sate, everything is in vain. I have disturbed you. I will take my leave." After speaking, Lin Fei turned around and strode away. In a few leaps, he disappeared without a trace. Supreme Elder, this Lin Fei. The three elders of the royal family watched as Lin Fei left. Their faces changed slightly. It seemed that they wanted to say something. But the Supreme Elder gently shook his head and said, "There's no need to try to win him over, no need to say anything superfluous. Lin Fei knows what he's doing. Right now, the Nine Profound Sect, the royal family, and even Great Chan are all inextricably linked. We either rise together or we fall together. It's just a pity that exotic beasts are now extinct, so it's almost impossible for Lin Fei to build his foundation and become a martial sate. Otherwise, if Great Chan wants to extend its national destiny for another few hundred years, it might depend on him." The three elders were shocked. They hadn't expected the Supreme Elder to rate Lin Fei so highly. He even said that the continuation of Great Chan's national destiny might depend on Lin Fei. "Supreme Elder, your ultimate fate. Go back, let nature take its course, what's supposed to come will come eventually." "Yes, Supreme Elder." The three dared not ask any further. They quickly left the Imperial Garden. Lin Fei returned to the South King Mansion. He didn't go to see Ling Yara. Instead, he went directly back to his own room. System. Lin Fei called out the system to check. Host, Lin Fei. Martial Art Realm, Innate Martial Artist. Master, Late Stage. True Intention Scroll, Late Stage, Progress 42%. Saber Intent, Transcendence, Progress 56%. Fist Intent, Mastery, Progress 81%. Heavenly Saber Art, Perfection, Progress 1%. Immeasurable Fist, Transcendence, Progress 50%. Close Yet Distant, Transcendence, Progress 0%. Refining the Golden Body, Progress 0%. During this period, Lin Fei's martial arts almost reached a bottleneck. Hard cultivation alone didn't mean much. At least, there wasn't much hope for a rapid increase in strength in a short time. The scene of his fight with the Supreme Elder of the royal family was still lingering in Lin Fei's mind. He had no chance of winning. Even more so, Lin Fei had a faint feeling. Even if his true chi reached perfection and he became a Grand Master, his saber chi could be stronger, he still wouldn't be a match for the Supreme Elder. If my saber intent progresses further, it becomes saber momentum. Saber momentum can rival a martial sate. Naturally, it can contend with a foundation establishment cultivator. However, to turn saber intent into saber momentum, one must first cultivate the saber intent to perfection. There are very few in the world who can have perfection in saber intent. It's too hard to make saber intent perfection just by grinding. However, there is another way. That is the fusion of saber intents. If Heavenly Saber Art can generate saber intent and then fuse with the original saber intent, there's a good chance that the saber intent will reach perfection. To push Heavenly Saber Art further, I must absorb more saber techniques at the perfection stage. Lin Fei's train of thought was clear. If he wanted to quickly improve his strength in a short time, there was only one way to improve his saber intent. To get saber intent to perfection had to fall on Heavenly Saber Art. There were more than 3 months left until Li Yibai's appointment. That's enough time. There are many saber wielders in the world, especially famous ones. It seems that I have to learn from the Hidden Sword sect. Use the title of a #1 saber under heaven as a pretext to challenge all saber wielders in the world. In this way, I can forcibly make heavenly saber art capture those saber techniques at the perfection stage and enhance its foundation. Lin Fei also made a decision in his heart. This method required him to act high profile. This was a bit contrary to Lin Fei's usual style. However, this was the only way. Moreover, with Lin Fei's current strength, he couldn't afford to be low-key. So, this number one saber under heaven, he would be. Chapter 154. Your saber has become dull. Lin Fei. Lin Yero came back. Lin Fei didn't know what she was busy with all day. Every day she left early and returned late. Moreover, it seemed that her martial arts had completely fallen into disrepair. After all, she was busy every day. Where would she have time to practice martial arts? Senior Sister Lin, I just came back from the front line and went to the palace. I didn't have time to tell you. Lin Fei, I already know about your situation on the front line. How strong are you really? Lin Yero couldn't help but ask. When she received a report from the court's rebellion suppression army and the messages that came in successively, the whole person was a bit dazed. She was shocked. Lin Fei actually collapsed the city wall of Kaiyan Prefecture with a single saber stroke. It was not the city gate, but a wall. She also knew about Kaiyan Prefecture. The city wall was high and strong. But even so, it couldn't resist Lin Fei's single saber stroke. During the suppression of the rebellion, whatever problem or trouble the court's army encountered, it was Lin Fei who made a move, solved directly with a single saber stroke. There was almost never a second saber stroke. For such a long time, Lin Yero only knew that her junior brother was the top genius of the 9 profound sect and his strength was very strong. But exactly how strong Lin Fei was, Lin Yero didn't know. If it were anyone else asking, Lin Fei wouldn't bother. But when Lin Yero asked, Lin Fei thought for a moment and said, under the Foundation establishment, I should be invincible. Perhaps the founder of the 9 profound sect in the past could barely beat me. Lin Fei told the truth. The founder of the 9 profound sect, although his true chi was perfect and his martial Dao true intent was perfect and he also mastered 3 types of martial Dao true intents, Lin Fei had cultivated saber chi and he also had heavenly saber art. He could exert the power of the heavenly saber. Even if the founder of the 9 profound sect came back to life, who was really stronger and who was weaker would have to be determined by a fight. Invincible under the Foundation establishment. Lin Yero was shocked. Of course she understood what this meant. And she also knew how heavy the weight of invincible under the Foundation establishment was. Not to mention that she is only a princess now, even if she inherited the title of the South King, even if she were the great Chan Emperor, facing Lin Fei, she would have to treat him as an equal even with added respect. She finally understood the reason Lin Fei had advised her to practice martial arts back then. Back then, Lin Fei was only a mere acquired martial artist. Even if he had become innate, actually, in terms of status, it was still slightly lower than a princess. However, now it's completely different. Invincible under the Foundation establishment. In the royal family, no one was an opponent except the Supreme Elder. Such a person was a dominant force. Moreover, many immortal sects did not have a true person in the Foundation establishment. That is to say, they were not as good as Lin Fei. Lin Fei alone could be compared to many immortal sects. Senior Sister Lin, I plan to continue honing my saber intent. I hope to be able to train it to perfection. Therefore, I need to exchange ideas with some top saber practitioners. I wonder who in Chan City are the masters of saber techniques. It's not necessarily about being strong, as long as the saber technique is outstanding and there are one or several martial artists who have trained a saber technique to perfection, it will do. Lin Fei planned to stay in Chan City for a while. First, challenge all the top saber practitioners in Chan City. then go to meet the top saber practitioners in the world, completely solidifying his title of #1 saber under heaven, and also capturing some saber techniques to enhance the foundation of heavenly saber art. Lin Fei, if you want to exchange ideas with the saber practitioners in Chang City, that's easy. Lin Yero had people investigate. She soon gave Lin Fei a list. On the list, there were some masters of saber techniques in Chang City belonging to top saber practitioners. Of course, perfection realm saber techniques were not necessarily top saber practitioners. After all, some people could only perfect their saber technique at the body refining level. But those who could perfect the saber technique, especially those who could perfect the acquired saber technique, must be the top saber practitioners. They would definitely not be nameless. The probability of capturing the perfection realm saber techniques was much higher. Lin Fei looked at the masters of saber techniques in Chang City given by Lin Yero. With a sweep of his eyes, he saw the first top saber practitioner, Mad Saber Zai Zhen, who has perfected the Mad Wind saber technique. One of the top masters of saber techniques in Chang City. Let's start with this Zai Zhen tomorrow. Lin Fei made a decision in his heart. Chang City, Champing Street. Here, there was a Mad Wind martial arts hall. Although it was a martial arts hall, those familiar knew that this hall was not easy to provoke. Because the owner of the hall was Mad Wind Saber Zai Zhen, who was an innate martial artist, a generation of masters. Although a master opening a martial arts hall seemed a bit of a step down, in fact, the Mad Wind Martial Arts Hall did not rely on accepting disciples to make a living. The hall only accepted disciples who were either rich or distinguished, and then relying on the Mad Wind Martial Arts Hall opened a series of businesses such as a dark pura, restaurant, silk and satin store, and so on. Of course, many people knew it was not that Zai Zhen had a business mind, but he has a few children. Relying on the Mad Wind Martial Arts Hall, they had developed to this point today. However, no matter what, this unprofitable Mad Wind Martial Arts Hall, in fact, was the foundation of the Zai family. At this moment, inside the Mad Wind Martial Arts Hall, all of Zai Zhen's children were present. Father, our Mad Wind restaurant needs to continue expanding. We need a lot of silver. This Zhong Chen is a famous wealthy businessman in Chang City. He just wants to pay his respects to you and use your reputation as an innate martial artist to grow his business even bigger, and he will also cooperate with our restaurant. In this way, wouldn't the problem of our Mad Wind restaurant lacking silver be solved? Yeah, that Zhong Chen is quite sincere. You just need to accept Zhong's invitation every month and show your face. Shut up. Zai Zhen's face turned pale. His gaze swept over each of his sons and daughters. Finally, he said coldly, the martial way is the foundation. And you? All day long, all you talk about is business and silver. Do you still look like martial artists? Father, not everyone can become innate. If you are an acquired martial artist, what can you count in this Chang City? Exactly, even if it's an innate master, it's just a bit of face in Chang City. There are nobles and even chi condensation cultivators everywhere here. It's better to take advantage of your reputation as an innate master and develop the business of our Zai family first. If there are any troubles, we have plenty of connections to smooth things over. You all. Zai Zhen was furious. He had practiced martial arts his whole life. As a result, when he came to Chang City, his children didn't practice martial arts anymore. They switched to business. Although it seemed like they had connections and money now, Zai Zhen was very clear. Once he died, these connections, relationships, and money were all useless. But his sons and daughters couldn't see through it. They didn't know the true weight of an innate martial artist. Is Mad Wind Saber Zai Zhen? I, Lin, have come specially to learn from Master's Mad Wind Saber technique. Just then, a cold voice came from the courtyard. HM. Zai Zhen suddenly looked up and towards the entrance. At the same time, his children also stepped out. Upon seeing the visitor, his eldest son furrowed his brow slightly and said, "This is not a place where anyone can just walk in. Furthermore, my father does not accept any challenges. You'd best leave now." However, the visitor seemed to ignore his words. He stood in the courtyard, not moving. The eldest son, a bit irked, loudly rebuked, "Who let this ruffian in? He has no manners. If you don't leave soon, I'll have the constables take you to jail. This is Chang City. How dare a martial artist like you be so presumptuous? Even if you're an innate martial artist, we can still throw you in jail." In Chang City, there were dedicated constables. Among them were chi condensation cultivators and innate martial artists. They were specifically there to deal with troublesome innate martial artists or chi condensation cultivators. Xia Huzeng's son, having a good relationship with some officials, had the confidence to say this. Whoosh! Lin Fei's gaze landed on Xia Huzeng's eldest son. Suddenly, Xia Huzeng felt his body trembling. It felt like facing a treasure saber with its sharp edge exposed. A slight lack of attention, and he would be cut in half. Talk more, and up like this tree. Lin Fei flicked his finger. Whoosh! A strand of saber energy instantly flew towards a big tree in the courtyard. Crack! The big tree was instantly cut in half by this strand of saber energy, collapsing with a rumble. Immediately, the faces of Xia Huzeng's children all turned pale. Their gaze filled with fear as they looked at the young man in front of them. "Back down!" Xia Huzeng came out. There was a hint of shock in his eyes. "May I ask who you are?" Xia Huzeng asked. "Nine Profound Sect, Lin Fei." "You are the Immortal Slayer Saber, Lin Fei." Xia Huzeng's eyes widened and his heart suddenly shocked. He no longer counted as a member of the martial world. All these years in Chang City, he was practically a rich man. However, Xia Huzeng was still an innate martial artist after all. And he was a top-level saberist. He still had some understanding of major events in the martial world. Who was Lin Fei? He was the notorious Immortal Slayer Saber. His saber could slay immortals. Xia Huzeng had heard of Lin Fei's strength. So, how could he dare to accept the challenge? Seeing Xia Huzeng not speaking, Lin Fei's eyes were icy, his gaze slightly disappointed. Whoosh! Lin Fei, with his hand acting as a saber, made a gentle slash towards Xia Huzeng. Crack! A strand of saber energy instantly landed on the treasured saber in Xia Huzeng's hand. Immediately, the treasured saber shattered, turning into pieces on the ground. Throughout, Xia Huzeng didn't even draw his saber. Mad Wind Saber technique is extremely disappointed with the original host and actively merges into your Heavenly Saber art. The progress of Heavenly Saber art increases by 5%. The system's voice echoed in Lin Fei's mind. This was the first time Lin Fei had encountered a martial art actively leaving its original host. However, Lin Fei had already achieved his goal. So, he didn't seek to fight Xia Huzeng anymore. He turned around and left directly. However, as Lin Fei was stepping out of the Mad Wind Martial Arts Hall, he paused for a moment. Xia Huzeng, your saber has become dull. Having said that, Lin Fei took a step forward. In a few leaps, he had disappeared without a trace. Chapter 155. The Path of Martial Arts. Father, are you okay? That person is too arrogant, he just attacked without warning. This is Chang City. Is it a place where a martial artist like him can act recklessly? I'm going to inform Lord Liu, let him send the chi condensation cultivators and innate martial artists to directly arrest this unruly martial artist and throw him into jail. It was only then that Xia Huzeng's eldest son seemed to come back to his senses and immediately spoke fiercely. Slap. Suddenly, Xia Huzeng slapped his eldest son's face. Immediately, there were 5 clear finger marks left on his son's face. Father, you unfilial son, shut up. Xiaohu Zheng's eyes instantly turned red. He roared angrily, "He is immortal slayer saber, Lin Fei. His saber is bound to slay immortals. Even the top-level chi condensation cultivators have been slain by his single saber stroke. Does your so-called Lord Liu dare to provoke Lin Fei? There is no one in the entire Chan city that Lin Fei does not dare to kill. Only Lin Fei is a real martial artist. And I have not deserved to draw my saber." Xiaohu Zheng's expression was full of despair. As for his son, he was completely dumbfounded. Covering his mouth, he didn't dare to speak. Top-level chi condensation cultivators all slain by a single saber stroke of Lin Fei. He didn't know what the concept of a martial artist like Lin Fei was. However, he knew what it meant to be a top-level chi condensation cultivator. That was an immortal master who even the emperor had to respect. Yet to Lin Fei, even such top-level chi condensation cultivators could be slain. Could a martial artist be this powerful? For a moment, the entire Mad Wind martial arts hall fell quiet. Lin Fei had already left the Mad Wind martial arts hall. Heavenly Saber Art had integrated the Mad Wind Saber technique. This was an acquired martial art. It was a pity that it only increased the practice progress of Heavenly Saber Art by 5%. According to Lin Fei's previous experience, the perfection saber techniques of the body refining level could increase the practice progress by 1%. Acquired level saber techniques could roughly increase the practice progress by 5%. Of course, this was not absolute. Some saber techniques were especially powerful. Once they reached the perfection state and were integrated into Heavenly Saber Art, it was certain that they could increase the practice progress even more. There are 3 great saber masters in Chan City. Besides a Mad Wind Saber Xiaohu Zhen, there are also Astonishing Goose Saber Shen He and a Soul-Chasing Saber Tai Lin. The next one, go find Astonishing Goose Saber Shen He. Lin Fei directly arrived at the Astonishing Goose Gate. This was a sect established by Shen He. 9 profound sects. Lin Fei especially came to learn saber techniques from Astonishing Goose Saber Master Shen He. Lin Fei directly strode into the Astonishing Goose Gate. A quarter of an hour later. Swish! Astonishing Goose Saber Shen He was disheveled. His hair was cut off by a strand of saber energy. Lin Fei turned around and walked out. Shen He, your saber technique is stronger than Xiaohu Zheng's. At least you can draw your saber. Having said that, Lin Fei didn't care what Shen He would do. He directly went to the soul-chasing gan, where soul-chasing saber Tai Lin was. This was a gan. 9 profound sects. Lin Fei especially came to learn saber techniques from soul-chasing saber Master Tai Lin. Another quarter of an hour later. Lin Fei walked out of the soul-chasing gan. Tai Lin was also disheveled, a picture of desolation. In one day, Lin Fei challenged the 3 great saber masters of Chan City, and all of them were defeated with one move. Especially Mad Wind Saber Xiaohu Zhen didn't even have the courage to draw his saber. For a time, Immortal Slayer Saber Lin Fei in Chan City stirred up another frenzy. However, Lin Fei was very disappointed. Among the 3 great saber masters, he only integrated 3 perfection stage acquired saber techniques. It only increased his practice progress by a total of 15%. There was still a long way to go before Heavenly Saber Art could birth the saber intent. Looking for martial artists with perfect saber techniques is too inefficient. Especially now in Chan City, there are only 3 saber masters, and I've sought them all out. Those body-refining martial artists, or martial artists who have only perfected the body-refining stage saber techniques, can also increase my saber technique foundation. I need to find a way to get them to come to me. But how can I attract these body-refining martial artists and acquired martial artists to come to me? A light flashed in Lin Fei's mind. He took out a porcelain bottle from his bosom. In the porcelain bottle, there was a pill. Heavenly Meridian Pill. Lin Fei helped Ling Yura become the champion of the royal competition. he received a heavenly meridian pill. However, Lin Fei later consumed the blood of the treasure snake. Relying on its blood, Lin Fei directly reached the 12th level of the acquired stage. Therefore, he didn't use this heavenly meridian pill. He always carried it with him. Unexpectedly, it came into use now. A heavenly meridian pill for acquired martial artists and body-refining martial artists had an unimaginable attraction. After all, it could directly open up a meridian. So, Lin Fei directly announced through the South King Mansion that anyone who had perfected saber techniques could challenge him. Just discussing saber techniques. No need for true chi or inner power. If they can defeat him, they could get a heavenly meridian pill. Suddenly, countless acquired martial artists, especially saber practitioners, flocked to the South King Mansion. However, even if they didn't use true chi or inner power, just comparing saber techniques, Lin Fei was still one of the top saber practitioners. In the blink of an eye, 10 days passed. Lin Fei spent 10 days at the South King Mansion and he defeated countless martial artists. But although the heavenly saber art integrated many martial arts, they were basically saber techniques at the body refining level. There were very few acquired level perfection saber techniques. Therefore, in 10 days, the cultivation progress of heavenly saber art only increased by 20%. Adding the 15% cultivation progress gained from defeating the 3 great saber masters, there was a total of 35% cultivation progress. Previously, heavenly saber art only had 1% cultivation progress. Up to now, it was only 36%. There was still a long way to go. Basically, all the saber practitioners in Chang City have come to the South King Mansion. Continuing to wait has no meaning. When Liu Yibai obtained the #1 sword under heaven, he did it by traveling all over the world and defeating everyone. Now if I want to collect countless perfection saber techniques and allow heavenly saber art to birth saber intent, I'm afraid I also have to travel the world and meet saber practitioners from all over. Lin Fei had already made up his mind. Even, he gradually spread some news that he wanted to follow the disciples of the Hidden Sword sect, travel all over the world, meet all the saber practitioners in the world, and seize the title of #1 saber under heaven. Whoever could defeat him, whether it was by martial arts or purely by saber techniques, he could give them a heavenly meridian pill. This news, with the constant spread by travelers and martial artists, spread all over the world in just a few days. It quickly caused a stir in the entire martial world. After all, this was Immortal Slayer Saber Lin Fei. Now he was openly vying for the title of #1 saber under heaven. As the saying goes, there is no first in literature and no second in martial arts. Even the martial artist who was indifferent to fame and fortune at this moment couldn't sit still. #1 saber under heaven. The entire Great Chan hadn't had a #1 saber under heaven for a long time. Instead, the Hidden Sword sect's #1 sword under heaven was well known and revered. South King Mansion. Lin Yara looked at Lin Fei with a complex expression. Lin Fei, have you really decided? Senior Sister Lin, I've made up my mind. The title of a #1 saber under heaven must be mine. Only in this way can I attract the top saber practitioners in the world, Lin Fei said calmly. The title of a #1 saber under heaven plus a heavenly meridian pill. I believe it's enough to attract all the saber practitioners in the world. Lin Yara knew that Lin Fei's grand display, known to everyone, was actually for the perfection of saber intent. Lin Fei was single-mindedly focused on the path of martial arts. But no matter how strong he was still only innate. Was it worth it? Senior Sister Lin, what were you fighting for when you were contending for the position of a princess? Lin Fei suddenly asked. To control my own destiny. Lin Yao immediately replied. That was what she thought back then. But even if you inherit the title of the South Princess, can you really control your own destiny? Lin Yao fell silent. Only after becoming the princess did she realize how complex and difficult it was to seize power. Lin Fei looked at Ling Yere, his gaze deep and calm. He spoke slowly, word by word. "Senior Sister Ling, if you want power, what's so difficult about it? Don't even mention the title of South Princess. Even if you want to become the Empress of Great Chan, it's not a big deal. If I become a martial sage, everything will be easy. I follow the path of martial arts for longevity. Senior Sister wishes for power. But even if you gain power and control your destiny, it's just a few decades. What does it amount to?" Lin Fei spoke word by word, staring at Ling Yere. "Senior Sister Ling, I hope you can figure out what you want during this time. Next time I return to Chang City, it will be time to help you achieve your wishes. Martial arts, power, you can choose either. If you choose martial arts, I will do my best to help you become an knight. If you choose power, even if you want to become an empress, I will help you." Lin Fei's voice echoed in Ling Yere's ears. By the time Ling Yere came to her senses, Lin Fei had already left the South Qin mansion, disappearing without a trace. There is no first in literature and no second in martial arts. This is a proverb. It means that even someone who writes exceptionally well would not dare to boast that their writing is the best in the world, while someone with great martial arts skills often boasts that their skills are unparalleled. It often refers to the tendency of martial artists to always claim superiority in their abilities. You know, martial artists are always competitive. Actually, I've always wanted to write a romantic scene between Ling Yere and Lin Fei, but I realized that I'm not really good at it, so you might find it a bit awkward. Chapter 156. Jianyan was shocked. Jianyan City, the largest city in the middle state of Great Chan, was virtually the core of the entire middle state. Lin Fei's first stop was here. Lin Fei sat at a wooden table in a tavern, observing the diverse crowd of customers, servers, and the owner. Everything seemed ordinary. However, when Lin Fei glanced at the food on the table, his expression became even colder. The world of martial arts is not just about martial skills. There are also schemes. I intend to solve matters with martial arts, but there are those who resort to schemes. Lin Fei's tone was calm, but there was a hint of coldness in his voice. The food on the table was poisoned. This was the first time Lin Fei encountered such a situation. Throughout his journey in the martial world, whether he encountered chi cultivators or martial artists, Lin Fei had never faced someone attempting to poison him. But now, as he sought the title of #1 saber under heaven and attracted saber cultivators from around the world, he encountered a nefarious tactic he had never seen before at his first stop in the martial world. Poison. This poison was colorless and tasteless. However, Lin Fei's perception was incredibly strong. As a result, when these people quietly poisoned the food, he already knew. Since they dared to poison him, it meant that the poison could affect innate martial artists and even potentially kill them. It was a formidable poison. "Come out, all of you. These tricks are not worth mentioning," Lin Fei rebuked in a low voice. With a whoosh, the expressions of those who were just ordinary pedestrians, servers, and the owner drastically changed. They all stood up, pulling out weapons from their bodies, and stared at Lin Fei. These people, totaling dozens, were all martial artists. At this moment, they all looked at Lin Fei with fear. Their attempt to poison him had failed. "Immortal Slayer Saber," one of them began, "we all know you are formidable. Your saber can slay immortals. Even the 3 saber masters of Chang City are no match for your saber. However, your Heavenly Meridian Pill is too tempting. For the sake of the Heavenly Meridian Pill, we can only take risks." Lin Fei understood. The Heavenly Meridian Pill. He had underestimated the allure of the Heavenly Meridian Pill for acquired martial artists. Or perhaps he had underestimated human nature. Lin Fei lifted his head, looking at these martial artists, and said calmly, "I came to martial worlds to meet the saber cultivators of Jianyan and confirm the saber techniques. I haven't killed anyone in Jiandian, but you want to poison me. As matters of the martial world, they should be resolved in the martial world. You should be killed. At this moment, Lin Fei's intent to kill was evident. Since they had attempted to poison him, Lin Fei would not be polite. After all, the martial world was never devoid of killing. In the next moment, Lin Fei flicked his finger. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Immediately, strands of saber energy burst out from his body and flew towards these dozens of martial artists. To deal with these martial artists, Lin Fei didn't even need to use any saber techniques, let alone his saber intent. Just his saber energy was enough. The strands of saber energy moved incredibly fast. With just a slight flash, they were instantly in front of these martial artists. PFFF. Crack. The saber energy instantly cut off the weapons of the martial artists and entered their bodies. No one could block Lin Fei's strand of saber energy. Therefore, within a short time, dozens of bodies fell on the floor of the tavern. Lin Fei stood up and left the tavern. Among these martial artists, there was not even a single one who had perfected saber techniques. Clearly, they were hardly considered saber cultivators. Even if they were saber cultivators, they were very ordinary ones. They didn't come to challenge Lin Fei in a saber duel but for the heavenly meridian pill. Leaving the tavern, Lin Fei came to the lake and saw an old man with a bamboo hat. The old man was holding an iron hammer and seemed to be hitting a rusty saber. The saber was very old and dull. It was repeatedly hammered by the old man, but it remained dull without any edge. Lin Fei quietly watched the old man continuously hammering the dull saber. After a long time, Lin Fei finally spoke. Your saber is dull, it can't be sharpened anymore. Yes, my saber hasn't been used for 40 years. The old man replied. Only today did I dig it up from the ground again. I may not care about profit, but in the end, I can't escape the word of fame. The old man looked up, his eyes were sharp as a saber. Immortal Slayer Saber Master Lin, if you want to become the #1 saber under heaven, and you chose Jiandian as your first stop, then I had no choice but to come out of retirement. I'm Li Sandao of Jiandian. Lin Fei's eyes remained calm. He had never heard of this old man, but he could guess that he was a senior figure in the martial arts world of Jiandian, especially among saber cultivators. This old man had retired his saber for 40 years but had now returned because of him. I'm Lin Fei from 9 Profound Sect, Lin Fei responded. Aren't you drawing your saber? Li Sandao asked. Lin Fei remained silent. Li Sandao gently held the hilt of the rusty saber, as if talking to himself, sealed for 40 years, old friend, I am holding you again. 40 years ago, the martial world called me 3 sabers because I had 3 unique saber techniques. But after sealing my saber for 40 years, I've condensed those 3 into 1. Immortal Slayer Saber Master Lin, do you dare to receive 1 saber strike from this old man? Senior, please draw your saber, Lin Fei said calmly. Very well. Swish. The next moment, the old man made his move. Previously, the old man didn't have any noticeable fluctuations of true qi or inner power. Even Lin Fei couldn't tell whether the old man was an acquired martial artist or an innate martial artist. But now, as the old man made his move, a trace of true qi fluctuation, although very subtle, was still detected by Lin Fei. The old man in front of him was an innate master and even 1 step away from the realm of martial grand master. 1 saber. The old man's saber strike completely converged its sharpness, not even much true qi erupted. Only when it was in front of Lin Fei did the innate true qi explode instantly. This was the old man's all-out strike, his strongest saber. This 1 saber, even if it was a martial grand master, the old man felt, perhaps would not be much different. However, Lin Fei just slightly shook his head, remaining unmoved. The next moment, the old man's body shook. Following that, his whole body seemed to tremble. He held the hilt of the rusty saber tightly in his hand, but despite exerting all his strength, he seemed to be unable to control the saber. At this moment, the old man looked horrified. Saber intent. The old man's eyes widened in shock, his heart filled with astonishment. What a terrifying saber intent. Although there were rumors in the martial world that Lin Fei, that immortal slayer saber, had a terrible saber energy that could cut through anything when he drew his saber, and the saber intent was also very powerful. However, in the vast majority of cases, the martial Dao true intent could only play a supporting role in martial artists' battles. Li Sandao did not expect that simply unleashing the saber intent would render him unable to control his own blade against Lin Fei. Lin Fei looked calm, looked at the old man, and said lightly, "Senior, you lost. You sealed your saber for 40 years, but you didn't comprehend saber intent. It doesn't matter if you condense 3 sabers into one. Even if you condense 30 sabers into one, what use is it? You spent a lifetime studying saber techniques, but you don't know the true essence of saber arts. In front of me, you can't even draw your saber. This saber, you've wasted a lifetime practicing it." After finishing his words, Lin Fei stepped forward. After a few leaps, he disappeared without a trace. I've wasted a lifetime practicing this saber." The old man's face turned pale. Then, it seemed like he realized something. "Yes, I've wasted a lifetime practicing this saber. Ha ha ha, this saber, I don't need it." The old man grabbed his saber and threw it hard. With a plop sound, the rusty old saber instantly sank into the bottom of the lake. Without looking back, the old man strode away. Lin Fei, that immortal slayer saber, descended from Chan City along the river to Jiandian. In 3 days in Jiandian, he defeated 5 saber technique masters. All the saber masters in Jiandian surrendered and willingly respected Lin Fei as the #1 saber under heaven. When the news spread out, Jiandian was shocked. Chapter 157. A saber severing the river. Chan City, Jiandian. Lin Fei reclined on a modest skiff. By this time, he had bidden farewell to Jiandian and said his goodbyes to Middle State. 19 states under the heavens, a realm rich in resources and vast in territory. Great Chan, truly, was a kingdom flourishing in prosperity. Hence, the scope of merely 2 states, Lin Fei's heavenly saber art had already attained a mastery of 60%. It could be acclaimed his gains were abundant. However, the sole thing inducing a twinge of regret within Lin Fei was that in the entirety of Jiandian and even throughout the whole of Middle State, not a single soul had comprehended the essence of the saber. Thus, Lin Fei continued to navigate downstream. This time, he was venturing towards a place of utmost importance. Saber City. This city bore the name of the saber. There was no other reason than this place had given birth to a revered saber sate. 1500 years ago, this place had given birth to an unrivaled saber sate. He was also the most widely acclaimed saber sate throughout the entirety of Great Chan. Every person in Great Chan knew of the hidden sword sect and the sword sate. But little did they know, Great Chan had also fostered a saber sate. Even more so, there existed a noble lineage of saber sates, continuing the bloodline of the saber sate, residing in Saber City. In Lin Fei's aspirations to become the #1 saber under heaven, and even to facilitate the birth of saber essence within his heavenly saber art, he must necessarily journey to Saber City. And now, he wasn't far from Saber City. Or rather, this very river also fell within the confines of Saber City. The ferryman, a man of 60 winters, upon reaching midday, pulled out the fish stored in the cabin. Using a kitchen saber, he swiftly gutted the fish. Swish, swish, swish. With each rise and fall of the ferryman's hand, his speed and proficiency were remarkable. Lin Fei, in tranquility, observed the ferryman carving the fish. In a muted voice, he uttered, "Old man, your skill with the saber is adept. With such mastery of the saber, if you held a deadly saber instead of a kitchen one, you would undoubtedly be a saber master. The ferryman, hearing this, couldn't help but chuckle. "Honored guest, you flatter me too much. However, having been born and raised in Saber City, I've been steeped in its traditions since my youth. Wouldn't it be a joke if I didn't know a few saber techniques? In Saber City, there's not a soul who doesn't know how to wield a saber." The elderly man seemed quite proud. "Oh? Every person in Saber City is skilled in saber techniques. Do you, old man, know of the Saber Sate?" Lin Fei inquired. "Of course I do. The story of the Saber Sate, even if I narrated it for 3 days and nights, wouldn't be enough. From my youth, I've been familiar with the tales of the Saber Sate. He's the pride of our Saber City." Merely mentioning the Saber Sate sent the ferryman into a wave of enthusiastic storytelling, seemingly without end. Tales of sabers splitting mountains, of sabers breaking rivers, of the change in heaven and earth with a single swing of a saber, and more. To the common people, these were all figures akin to demigods. Naturally, the tales were as exaggerated as they could possibly be. Lin Fei didn't interrupt the ferryman's passionate discourse. He silently listened to the narratives about the Saber Sate. After a long while, the ferryman's mouth turned dry from talking. Lin Fei passed him a cup of tea, then continued his inquiry. "Does the old man know about the noble lineage of Saber Saints within Saber City? Being descendants of the Saber Sate, they must possess many top-class saber masters, right? After all, they are the bloodline of the Saber Sate. Surely their legacy is substantial." The ferryman's face darkened slightly, then he shook his head and said, "The lineage of the Saber Sate, the current lineage has long lost the spirit of the Saber Sate. I've heard it said that the beneficial influence of a good man ceases after 5 generations. As the common saying goes, wealth does not pass through 3 generations. But the lineage of the Saber Sate, they've been continuing for over 1,000 years. Heck, continuing for a millennium, is that so easy? The intricacies within. Well, it's better not to speak of the Saber Sate lineage." Every time the ferryman mentioned the lineage of the Saber Sate, he shook his head. He seemed quite unsatisfied with the lineage, or perhaps many people in Saber City were dissatisfied with them. This was also normal. A millennial lineage, how could there not be degenerates? Over 1,000 years, the Saber Sate lineage had become an overwhelming entity, its reach extending to every facet of Saber City. However, what the Saber Sate lineage amounted to had nothing to do with Lin Fei. Lin Fei needed that mastery, even perfect, in saber techniques, the top-class saber masters. Therefore, regardless, he needed to visit this lineage of Saber Saints. Soon, the ferryman finished preparing the fish. "Honored guest, come and taste how well this old man's craft fares," he warmly invited Lin Fei for a taste. "HN." Lin Fei suddenly looked up. His eyes narrowed slightly. At that moment, on the distant river surface, a ship stretching several dozen meters slowly approached. Hanging on the ship was a banner. Upon seeing it, the ferryman's face subtly changed. In a low voice, he said, "It's a ship from the lineage of the Saber Sate. We should steer clear." The ferryman immediately began to paddle, steering the small boat away from the lineage of the Saber Saint's massive ship. However, the large ship unexpectedly adjusted its course slightly. Its destination was directly towards Lin Fei's little boat. "Is the person aboard the small boat ahead the immortal Slayer Saber Master Lin Fei?" Suddenly, a voice echoed from the large ship. Lin Fei narrowed his eyes slightly. He moved to the front of the boat and responded loudly, "It is indeed Lin. Who are you?" "We are members of the Saber Sate lineage from Saber City. We heard that Master Lin is here to engage in a saber meet, aiming for the title #1 saber under heaven. Our Saber Sate lineage has come specially to welcome Master Lin." "Welcome?" Lin Fei's gaze turned cold. He looked at the huge ship. "If you're here to welcome me, why do you bring so much oil and axe saber wielders?" At this, the faces of the people aboard the ship from the Saber Sate lineage changed dramatically. The saber-sate lineage gave a wave of their hand, no longer concealing their intentions. A large number of archers poured out from the ship's cabin, holding strong bows. Furthermore, the arrowheads were soaked in oil, ablaze with roaring flames. One by one, the fire arrows aimed at Lin Fei's small boat. At this moment, the ferryman's face turned deathly pale, his body trembling uncontrollably. "Disaster, disaster," he murmured repeatedly. He was just a small ferryman, owning a living by ferrying boats. How could he have anticipated running into such a disaster today? Judging by the posture of the saber-sate lineage, they were not merely trying to intimidate. Those martial artists want to kill me for the heavenly meridian pill. I can understand this point. But you, the saber-sate lineage, even without the heavenly meridian pill, should have no shortage of martial artists, right? You even have innate masters. Why are you trying to kill me? Lin Fei's tone remained calm. Why? You just too confident, Master Lin. You want to claim a #1 saber under heaven, and we, the saber-sate lineage, do not object. But you should not have come to Saber City. This Saber City is the Saber City of our saber-sate lineage. Once you arrive at the Saber City, you'll inevitably challenge us. Given the strength of your immortal Slayer saber, we, the saber-sate lineage, have enough self-awareness to know we can't resist. If our lineage loses its prestige, how can we stand in Saber City? So, we have no choice but to take action. Lin Fei finally understood. In the end, it all came down to fame and profit. The saber-sate lineage had managed to continue for over 1,000 years primarily because of its prestige. Their word was law in Saber City. However, if Lin Fei were to topple the saber-sate lineage, what prestige would they have left? Over time, the saber-sate lineage would slowly decline in Saber City. This was the power of fame and profit. But aren't you afraid of me? Ha ha ha, who doesn't know the fame of Immortal Slayer Saber? If we were on land, of course, we'd fear you. However, on this vast river, even the mighty Immortal Slayer Saber can only succumb. Lin Fei looked around. Indeed. Here he was at the center of a great river, surrounded by endless water, with no side of the shore. Martial artists were not chi cultivators. They didn't have magical artifacts and couldn't fly. If they fell into the water, even the strongest martial artist wouldn't be able to exert much power. Apparently, the saber-sate lineage had been keeping an eye on Lin Fei all along, hence their decision to strike now. This was their only chance to kill Lin Fei. Your plan is impeccable and your arrangement meticulous. It seems the saber-sate lineage has some wise individuals. However, no matter the amount of scheming or strategizing, we, as martial artists and saber practitioners, rely ultimately on our sabers. With that, Lin Fei jumped directly into the water. Huh? Everyone, whether from the saber-sate lineage or the old ferryman, showed surprise on their faces. Instead of staying on the boat and fighting for his life, Lin Fei voluntarily jumped into the water. Was he trying to commit suicide? However, when Lin Fei licked off the small boat, he stepped on the water surface. Immediately, ripples appeared on the water surface. Even under Lin Fei's feet, a whirlpool formed. Lin Fei, step by step, walked on the water's surface as if he were on land, heading directly towards the saber-sate lineage lightship. He's walking on water. How is this possible? The records left by our saber-sate lineage say that only those who have achieved physical perfection can walk on water without sinking. Could it be Lin Fei has achieved physical perfection? But there have been no traces of exotic beasts, so how could he achieve physical perfection? For a moment, the people from the saber-sate lineage were shocked. No, he hasn't achieved physical perfection. His innate true chi is extremely rich, and there's a rumor that Lin Fei doesn't cultivate innate true chi, but saber chi. He's using his thick saber chi to walk on water. We must stop him, shoot the arrows, kill him. Despite their shock, the people of the saber-sate lineage had to take action. They had no other choice. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Suddenly, a rain of arrows was launched toward Lin Fei. A layer of saber energy enveloped Lin Fei, bouncing off the arrows that struck in. They fell into the water. Lin Fei stood with his hands behind his back, walking on the water just like a land-bound immortal, completely at ease. The rain of arrows couldn't touch him at all. Step by step, Lin Fei was nearing the colossal ship of the Saber Saint lineage. A glint of peculiarity flashed in his eyes. I have heard that the original Saber Saint could split the river with a single slash of his saber. Today, I, Lin Fei, would like to emulate the Saber Saint. Let's see if I can split the river with my saber. Lin Fei's voice was calm, but it resonated clearly in everyone's ears. Boom. The next moment, Lin Fei's saber energy burst forth, and 250 meters long saber energy suspended in midair. This was Lin Fei's condensed heavenly saber. The martial artists on the giant ship were all from Saber City, and almost every one of them carried a saber. However, in the presence of the heavenly saber, all of their sabers were trembling. Regardless of how hard they tried to pull their sabers out, they were unable to do so. Splash! The sabers actually flew out of their hands, ascending into midair as if drawn by an invisible force. The scene looked as if the sabers were showing their submission to the heavenly saber. Everyone was stunned as if they couldn't believe their own eyes. Heavenly saber art, slash. In the next moment, Lin Fei waved his hand. Instantly, the 250 meters long heavenly saber, carrying the might of overturning the heavens, slashed fiercely toward the giant ship below. Boom! In an instant, the giant ship was cut in half from top to bottom. Simultaneously, the horrifying saber energy even cut several hundred meters long and 30 meters wide trenches into the river, deep enough to see the bottom. Such power was akin to the divine. Can a saber really split the river? Is it true? The old man who witnessed the scene was wide-eyed, seemingly unable to believe it. Old man, I'll be on my way now. With that, Lin Fei tossed a silver ingot. He didn't even glance at the people of the Saber Saint lineage floating in the water. Instead, he continued his leisurely walk on the water, heading towards Saber City. 5 days later, news spread from Saber City. Immortal Slayer Saber Lin Fei walked on water, split the river with a single saber strike, annihilated the Saber Saint lineage, and defeated all the saber masters in Saber City. Tens of thousands of saber practitioners in Saber City willingly acknowledged Lin Fei as the #1 saber under heaven. As the news spread, Saber City was shocked. The martial arts world was shocked. Chapter 158. Discussing saber techniques, a matter of life and death. The so-called millennium-old families are nothing more than worms and dogs. Lin Fei shook his head. He was referring to the Saber Saint lineage. Ever since he had sliced the Saber Saint lineage ship in half with a single saber strike and paid a personal visit to Saber City, he had wiped out the entire Saber Saint lineage. Regrettably, he only encountered 2 martial arts masters, and they were the weakest ones. In front of Lin Fei, they couldn't even draw their sabers. While Lin Fei's saber intent was indeed formidable, a martial artist with firm conviction and strong willpower could overcome the intimidation of the saber intent and draw their saber for combat. Unfortunately, the supposedly prestigious Saber Saint lineage, the descendants of the Saber Saint, were unable to even draw their sabers. They had all been reduced to mere worms and dogs and were easily killed by Lin Fei with a single saber strike. His trip to Saber City also pushed his cultivation progress in the heavenly saber art to 90%. Its progress had increased by almost 30%. Indeed, Saber City lived up to its reputation. Whether it was saber techniques at the body refining perfection level or the acquired perfection level, there were countless. They had all integrated into Lin Fei's heavenly saber art, enabling it to progress rapidly. The birth of saber intent in the heavenly saber art seemed not far off. The number of saber techniques that Lin Fei had integrated into the heavenly saber art was already in the dozens. There were too many to count. However, to generate saber intent in the heavenly saber art, more perfection-level saber techniques were needed. Lin Fei could only continue to move forward. However, with Lin Fei demonstrating his invincible prowess in Chang City, Jianyuan, and Saber City, his journey henceforth became much smoother. Even saber practitioners were becoming scarce. Almost no one came looking for Lin Fei anymore. Apparently, they had implicitly acknowledged Lin Fei's title of #1 saber under heaven. Moreover, even if they were coveting the heavenly meridian pill, those body-refining martial artists and acquired martial artists also knew they were no match for Lin Fei. Even in a pure competition of saber techniques, they could not compete with Lin Fei. As such, Lin Fei continued on his journey for over a month without encountering a single martial artist who had reached the perfection level in saber techniques. There's still 10% left in my heavenly saber art cultivation progress. The perfection level saber techniques at the body refining stage can increase the heavenly saber art's cultivation progress by 1%. Acquired level perfection saber techniques can increase the heavenly saber art's cultivation progress by 5%. According to this assumption, innate level perfection saber techniques should be able to increase the heavenly saber art's cultivation progress by over 10%. That means I don't need to find other martial artists. I just need to find a saber technique master who has reached the perfection level of the innate saber technique. By then, the cultivation progress of the heavenly saber art will surely reach 100%, thus giving birth to saber intent. But where can I find a martial artist who has cultivated innate level saber techniques to perfection? Lin Fei fell into deep thought. The Hidden Sword sect had the #1 sword under heaven and was filled with master swordsmen. Going to the Hidden Sword sect, one could certainly find top-tier swordsmen. But in the whole of Great Chan, there wasn't a sect dedicated to saber techniques like the Hidden Sword sect. Hence, finding top-tier saber masters was difficult. Lin Fei sat by the river, holding a wine gourd in his hand. He took a sip of the wine. It was a little spicy and strong. However, Lin Fei had grown to like this feeling. Now, Lin Fei felt a tinge of loneliness in his heart. A kind of unrivaled loneliness. This was not to say that Lin Fei was invincible in terms of strength. He was still far from being truly invincible. At least for now, Lin Fei was no match for those who have reached the foundation establishment stage. Lin Fei felt invincible in terms of saber techniques. He felt lonely in terms of saber techniques. Back when he started his martial arts journey in the 9 Profound sect, Lin Fei chose saber techniques, boxing, and lightness techniques. Among them, both saber techniques and boxing generated intent. But till this day, Lin Fei's saber intent had reached transcendence, even approaching perfection, while his boxing intent remained at mastery. Lin Fei was better suited to the saber. Not all martial arts need to be perfected and the strongest. In Lin Fei's view, any martial art, once practiced to the extreme, was invincible. Even if in martial arts, at the body refining, acquired, and even innate levels, they were actually weaker than those Qi cultivators. Lin Fei was a special case. Other martial artists, even martial arts masters, were weaker than those high-level, top-tier Qi condensation cultivators. But once martial artists established their foundation and became martial saints, it was different. They might even be stronger than the average foundation establishment cultivators by a small margin. This was the result of practicing martial arts to the extreme. Perhaps the founder was also this lonely. And the Sword Saint of Hidden Sword sect 300 years ago was also as lonely. In this world, who can challenge me in saber techniques? As he gazed at the vast river, Lin Fei muttered to himself. His saber techniques, cultivated to such an extent, were nearly invincible. The number of people who could keep up with his pace, or even become his opponent, was very few. The feeling of loneliness is uncomfortable. I felt this 20 years ago. So, 20 years ago, I sealed away my saber and went back to the countryside to be an old farmer. Suddenly, a strong voice sounded in Lin Fei's ear. Whoosh! Lin Fei swiftly lifted his head. With his current 5 senses, very few people could approach him without him noticing. But this person had intruded into his 10 meters radius before he sensed it. Danger! This was a very dangerous person. Lin Fei saw the newcomer. It was a middle-aged man who seemed to have seen many hardships. Dressed in the tight clothing of an ordinary martial artist, he looked very ordinary. However, Lin Fei was very clear. Anyone who could get within his 10 meters range definitely wasn't ordinary. Who are you? Lin Fei asked. Someone who can debate saber techniques with you. The middle-aged man replied calmly. Debate saber techniques. Lin Fei's eyes became sharp. He saw the saber in the man's hand. It was an utterly ordinary-looking saber. Even the traces of the passage of time could be seen on the scabbard. It was a bit old. It's rare to see someone actively seeking to debate saber techniques with me. Just comparing saber techniques without using inner power or true qi. Lin Fei said. These days, even when Lin Fei debated saber techniques with others, they didn't really put up a serious fight. Because no one was his match. They could only simply compete in saber techniques. Those who practice the saber do it to kill, not for practicing martial arts forms. If they don't fully commit to defeating their opponent and aim to kill, why practice the saber? I am here to debate saber techniques with you. Naturally, I will use all means necessary. Debating saber techniques also involves life and death. Whoosh! The words of the middle-aged man made Lin Fei's gaze incredibly sharp. Good, debating saber techniques also involve life and death. Since you came to debate saber techniques with me, you should know who I am. Of course I do, Immortal Slayer Saber Lin Fei, your saber slays immortals. Starting from Chang City, you went to Jianyuan, Saber City, defeating all the Master Saber practitioners. On the surface, you are fighting for #1 saber under heaven. But in reality, I know you're not fighting for the title of #1 saber under heaven. You are honing your saber intent, hoping that your saber intent can reach perfection. You are testing your saber against all saber practitioners in the world. At this moment, Lin Fei was certain. This middle-aged man truly came to debate saber techniques with him. Moreover, he might be an unprecedented top-tier saber practitioner. A ripple of excitement formed in Lin Fei's heart. That was the feeling of excitement.